If you do cornrows, that's cultural appropriation. Dress up in an Indian outfit, that's cultural appropriation. Fucking use too much seasoning on your food, that's cultural appropriation. Like everything you do, that's cultural appropriation. Welcome to the Social Condom. Today we are going to be talking about cultural appropriation. So, before we talk about cultural appropriation, let's talk about what is a culture. So, a culture is a set of behaviors or manners of interaction, religion, language, dress code, traditions, customs that pertain to a specific society or identity, and basically is passed on from generation to the next. And that is basically what makes a culture. So it's beyond race or ethnicity or religion, and a culture could be within any of these things. So a religion could have its own culture, and a nationality could have its own culture, and a what else? Ethnicity could have its own culture. So there's a lot of things that a culture could be a part of. So that's what a culture is. And then appropriation is basically taking something from someone, from the owner of something, without their permission. So cultural appropriation is essentially if you do not belong to a specific culture or in a specific culture, and or you don't adopt that specific culture, and then you use it to exploit it or to disrespect the people who relate to that culture, or to tarnish the reputation, etc., etc. So basically, it means that you're someone who is trying to tarnish a culture's reputation through disrespect or exploitation by pretending to be of that culture, or whether seriously or jokingly, but mostly in a way that disrespects and um, stereotypes the people who adopt that culture. So that's what the definition of cultural appropriation is, right? Definition. Now I want to talk about the perception of the people now and how they feel about cultural appropriation, like what people think it is. I feel like a lot of people now, if you do cornrows as a hairstyle, they're gonna say that's cultural appropriation. If you do an afro, cultural appropriation. If you dress up in like an Arabic garb or outfit, cultural appropriation. If you attempt to mimic an accent or a language, cultural appropriation. And they just throw that word left and right, and it honestly bothers me a lot because I feel like a lot of these people don't even understand what the word means, and they just see what your outward appearance looks like, and then if you don't behave exactly as what your stereotypical outward appearance is, then you're automatically going to be labeled as a cultural appropriator. So basically putting everyone in this box of what they look like and then how they should behave as a consequence of that outward appearance. So that's one thing. The other thing is I feel like the cultural appropriation label is usually thrown at the majority, not the minority. So I feel like it's typically something that is like white people are accused of, in at least in the U.S. Not so much everyone else, but I mean everyone gets it, but you know, predominantly white people, and I think that's because maybe they're the majority, and then they're expected to respect the minority more. I don't know what the reasoning behind it is, but that's typically how it goes. So this is the perception of people now. It's like if you don't behave exactly as you look, then cultural appropriation. Now I want to talk about some negative effects of cultural appropriation and when it could hurt people who follow that culture or people who are a part of that culture, because this is very important, right? Like essentially, the whole point of cultural appropriation is to, or the whole point of avoiding it is to avoid having negative effects onto the people who adopt that culture, right? Because if you have if you behave in a certain way that tarnishes a group's reputation, then you are also creating consequences for the people who are a part of that group. So I want to talk about the negative effects of cultural appropriation because that's very important. So if you are someone who is dressing up as someone from a specific culture, let's say you dress up in an Indian outfit and you go out in public and you act like a total fool, right? You pick up the accent in English, or you pick up a few words from the Hindi language, or whatever it is, and then you go out in public and you pretend to be a part of that group and you behave like a complete idiot, like a complete fool. You're disrespecting people. You're setting a horrible example. The problem with that is whether you were actually Indian or not, the people who are perceiving you might not be very conscious about the way they perceive you. So whether they know you're Indian or you know that you're portraying an Indian, some people, a lot of people unfortunately, will still judge Indians based on what they saw in you, based on how they judged you as an individual. And because you resembled that culture or you resembled a group of people, they are automatically just going to, in their subconscious, judge that entire group of people. So the next time they see someone from that group, that they're going to be seeing it through that filter that they created based on how they perceived you. So this is a negative effect. And this is a cute way of describing it because obviously a lot of people, it's not just a matter of they perceive them through a filter. They can treat them differently. They can harm them. They can talk bad about them. They can threaten them. There's a lot of things that could go wrong when a stupid person judges an entire people based on an individual's behavior, right? So that's like the negative effects that cultural appropriation can have. And that's why this is very frowned upon, because it's not cool if you are doing something, whether with no intention or with a bad intention, that has a bad side effect or a bad effect as a result of your behavior. So we need to understand what cultural appropriation is in order to actually avoid doing it, but not in the way that these social warriors want us to stop. Fit in your box. If you're white, dress white. If you're black, dress black. That's not how it works, right? All right, so this leads me to the next point, which is social warriors, aka woke Karens. So I feel like most woke Karens are of a younger generation. I think so I'm 28 years old. I think people who are born maybe post 2000s, and that's not to say that to generalize, but I feel like I see this behavior mostly from that age group. So people who are born post 2000s tend to have a skewed idea of what cultural appropriation is. And don't get me wrong, I think people from my generation and previously, there was a lot of normalized racism, which is fucked up. And obviously, this is probably what brought up the whole cultural appropriation talk to begin with, because people from my generation and before were just very casually racist, and we weren't really educated about it. And so we started to wake up to the fact that, oh shit, a lot of the things we say and do is racist. So we have to be very careful about that. But then sometimes when something is brought to attention to the world or to society, it's brought like the moment, it has too much momentum that it swings to the other side, where it's like too extreme and too sensitive. And we just kind of have to bring that pendulum back to equilibrium, so we're somewhere in the middle, and that's what I'm attempting to do today. So social warriors, they tend to have a very extreme idea of what cultural appropriation is. And if you do cornrows, that's cultural appropriation. If you dress up in an Indian outfit, that's cultural appropriation. If you fucking use too much seasoning on your food, that's cultural appropriation. Like, everything you do, whether it's actually cultural appropriation or not, it seems to fall under the cultural appropriation label, which is a problem, right? Like, speak up for what's right, but we need to understand whether that person is actually attempting to culturally appropriate a culture and is actually trying to disrespect or stereotype or um, make funny a specific culture or a specific people. And then based on that assessment, we can throw around the insult or the, I guess, the accusation of cultural appropriation. Otherwise, don't just fucking throw that word around, right? So that's these social warriors. Like, good for you for speaking up, but let's use our brains a little bit more and our common sense and judgment. Now, other people on the other side of the spectrum, so not the social warriors, the opposite of social warriors, who are people that are not using their full brain capacity, maybe at most they're using one brain cell, are people who are very subconscious in the way that they approach everything, especially their judgments. If I go and I dress up as a Nigerian person, I'm not Nigerian, and then I behave like a total idiot, right? Someone who sees me behaving like an idiot and dressed like a Nigerian is gonna think Nigerians are idiots. Period. Point blank. Stored in the subconscious. Next time they see a Nigerian, they pull up the idiot card. Okay? That's because they are judging people, judging cultures and entire people based on an individual. So don't be stupid. The same thing, by the way, applies to if I was actually Nigerian, dressed up as a Nigerian or not, and I am being a total fool, and someone judges me because I'm Nigerian, and they associate Nigerians with being foolish, then that's obviously wrong. So use your fucking brain and don't judge entire people. Don't generalize your judgments because someone fits a certain group or a certain look. Okay? So let's again use your brain. So stop judging entire groups based on individuals. The way an individual behaves is the way that individual behaves, regardless of what their look or accent or uh, uh, religion resembles. Okay? People are very complex, and we don't operate that way. All right. Now there is a misconception that you have to somehow earn or own the culture before you resemble it. That's fucking stupid. In my opinion, that's like insane to think that any one person or any one group owns anything, owns a look or a smell or a way of cooking or a religion or a language. Like, it doesn't work that way. None of us, and I mean none of us, had any say in the culture or in the ethnicity or in the nationality or in the religion or in the customs and traditions that we were born into. None of us. So I'm Egyptian. I can't take credit for any of the Egyptian customs and traditions. I can't. I was merely born into it. My parents can't. Their grandparents can't. These things were put into place for a very long time before they ever existed and before I ever existed. So that I can't take credit for that. And because I can't take credit for that, I also don't have ownership. I can't claim ownership. And because I don't have ownership, I can't go around judging people, telling people who can say what and who can do what and who can dress how and who can speak. That's not my place, and it's not anyone else's place for that matter. Right? Egyptian custom is something that has been there, and people who are I don't want to say fortunate enough, but people who've had the chance to be born into it adopt it, and some of them, like me, unadopt it at some point. So I don't own it, and the people who adopt it don't own it. I don't know who the fuck owns it. It's something that happened over time. So the idea that you need to earn something, so let's say you're white, but you've lived in a black neighborhood, yeah, you've earned your cornrow skill. Like, that's not how it works. I know I'm stereotyping. I'm just speaking very broadly because I want to just get the message across, right? Like, hey, you're Arab. You can read the fucking. I don't fucking know, man. Look, I'm not a geologist. I'm not a culturalist. So I don't know any of these things. However, if you're Italian, you don't get the ownership over pasta. If you are Mediterranean, you don't get ownership over Mediterranean food. If you are black, you don't get ownership over rap music. All of these stereotypes and things that fall into the category of culture, they're not owned by anyone and they're not earned. They are simply things that exist and we merely are born into them and adopt them either by birth or by choice. Okay? So don't fall for that trap. You don't need to earn anything or own anything. There is no street credit. There is no credit that you need to have. No one needs to give you the permission to use something. You can't walk around and say, "Oh yeah, my friend is my friend is Russian, so I have the right to do this dance." That's not how it works. You have the right to do this dance regardless. Okay, don't fall for that trap. With that being said, I will say that learning the culture is important. So, what does that mean? If you are someone who wants to express themselves in a way that is predominantly known or associated with a culture, so let's say you want to wear a yarmulke on your head, okay? Yarmulke is a Jewish tradition. You can't you can just go ahead, like you have the right to go ahead and wear a yarmulke. Who cares? Like it's just a piece of fabric, and that piece of fabric worn in a specific way resembles something to a certain group of people, but they don't own it, and they certainly don't have more of a right to judge you than anyone else. That's not how it works. However, if you are wanting to express yourself in a certain way that you know is very closely associated to a culture, maybe educate yourself about that thing before you do it. Not because you're afraid of people's judgments, but because in case there are very specific rules around it and it could hurt someone or it could offend someone by the way that it's misused or missaid or misdone, you want to avoid that. Again, not because they have a right to judge you, but because as humans we just want to be respectful to each other. So if you wearing the yarmulke and you're not Jewish and you're not, let's say for example, going to do a specific ritual, and Jewish people are going to find that very offensive, then maybe you want to weigh, how important is wearing the yarmulke to me? Do I really need to wear it and offend all of these people? Is it worth it? Or is it not? If it's not that important to you, you might, and by learning what that thing resembles, you can make a just decision. You can be able to weigh your options better and make an informed decision based on the information you learn. So that's why learning the culture is good. It's good for you. It's good for conversations. It's good for understanding other people in general. But it's also good for making decisions like this and for understanding when you see other people behaving in a certain way or doing a certain ritual or dressing a certain way, you have an idea of what that is. Education is nice, says the guy who just butchered all the cultures with his examples. And then finally, just be careful because idiots exist. What do I mean by be careful? If you are going to, whether you are resembling your own culture or someone else's culture, just know that there are people judging you because they are cultural judgers, and they judge you simply based on your looks, but they're not only judging you, they're also judging everyone that you resemble. So whether that is your parents or the culture that you are trying to assimilate or the character you're trying to portray, whatever it is, there are people judging you. So take that into consideration because your actions could lead to real life consequences to other people, close to you or far away from you. And because these people are always going to exist, people who don't use a lot of brain cells and just judge entire people based on an individual's behavior, you just want to be more careful to not let these people hurt other people. So just be careful whether you have good or bad intentions. Well, if you have bad intentions, you're not going to care anyway. But if you have good intentions or if you have no intentions at all, you're simply expressing yourself in a certain way, just be careful about the things that you do. And the way you are careful is by learning the culture so that you're not doing anything that breaks any certain code and reflects badly on a certain people. And then you be careful by common sense and by being a decent person. Don't go around disrespecting people so that, or doing things that can create a negative image of you and of others that you are resembling. Just be careful. And finally, I just want to say cultural appropriation is a problem, but it's not nearly the problem that we are seeing online and everyone is making it out to be, where if you eat black beans, you're culturally appropriating South Americans. That's not the case. All right? Uh, Personally, if you want to dress in an Arab costume, and yes, I call it a costume, people are like, no, it's not a costume. It's a costume. It's an outfit. An outfit is a costume. I don't know what your definition is, but to me, any outfit is a costume. I don't care if it's related to a culture or a nationality or not. It's a costume because it's something that you wear and it's something that is cohesive from top to bottom. It's a costume. Anyway, I don't mind if people wear Arab outfits as a costume in Halloween. And I don't care if they do it, if they do their hair a certain way, or if they like a certain kind of music, or if they want to speak a certain way. Like if a white person, or if I'm not black, what if I want to speak with a African American accent? I like it. I love it. Why should I be looked down upon, right, or judged for doing that? I love the accent. It's my right to speak it. I don't need to earn it or own it because no one does in order to have the right to do it. And the same thing should apply to a lot of things. The only thing I have a problem with is when we are mimicking these things to disrespect people deliberately, or wearing an Arab outfit and then throwing a suicide vest on top of it, creating negative associations that cultural judges are going to judge us based on. So do what you wish, just be careful and learn and be respectful, and just don't fall for the actual definition of cultural appropriation. And if someone judges you or labels you a cultural appropriator based on their perception, just check if it actually fits the description, or if your intentions were negative, or if you actually did something that breaks a code. All right? That's all it is. And thank you for watching The Social Condom. This is cultural appropriation. See you next Monday.